So hello everyone. Again, we are discussing something related to a Scrum Master interview this time. I think it's a little bit of a case study situation where some scenario need to be discussed. But before that, you may want to give a little brief about you and then we get started and talking about something you want to explore in the scenario space. Go ahead, give your little bit brief about you.
Okay. So, Saket, okay, I have been into IT industry for last 8 years. Okay. So I have been into the various roles. I started my career as software developer. So, and then after 2 years, I moved into business analyst role and
Mm-hmm.
then into the Scrum Master role. Okay. And I am like a big fan of yours to be true. Okay. I have been watching your videos and those are like quite very helpful. Okay. I would say uh, I was not knowing initially what I'm doing wrong in my interviews, but then after watching lot many of your videos, I'm like pretty confident, and I'm having 2 offers in hand right now.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I'm looking for some better opportunity with some branding.
Okay.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so there is one scenario I want to discuss with you, and I would like to ask you, okay, how are you going to behave in that situation? Suppose you are a scrum master and you have joined a team, right? And it is your second or third day, right? And while you have joined the team was actually working into the agile mode, right? But then it was more of waterfall only. Okay, behaving more of in the waterfall method, like they are working the waterfall methodology, as they are spending a lot of time in gathering the requirements, and they were not like releasing frequently, right? So they
Okay.
were releasing infrequently, they were most of the time busy in gathering the requirements. And so as a scrum master, like we want them to move to agile ways of working, like where they are releasing more frequently and learning. This is how agile works, right? So we want them to move to completely agile pace, right? And maybe when you have joined, as I said, it's your second or third day since the team is already in their sprint. So you are waiting that let the team complete their sprint, and once they complete, so we'll pause for a after that sprint, and maybe in the next sprint, for half of the sprint, you are going to actually prepare a plan how you are going to change what the team has currently been doing. Okay, so like in order to influence the agile mindset, like you are pausing the development for 5 days at the end of the current sprint. So like also, like so far you have learned, like the team is forming, they are new, right? And their development approach is also not user centric, and the average scrum experience of the team is less than 3 years. So
Mm-hmm.
in that scenario, you have to create a 5 day immersion schedule, right? And describe the key input, output, and the deliverables. How are you going to plan your next 5 days in order to make sure that you are resolving all these problems and actually bring them to the agile pace of working?
Okay.
So this is
So
my question.
So the first thing I will tell is whenever you deal such kind of case study based situations, there is no right and wrong answer, and it all depends upon how convincingly you put your thought process. So it is not like I should be taking care of two things, three things, four things. Whatever you take care of, you should be very confident why I am doing it and what are the reasons behind it. Yeah, that's the one thing we need to keep in mind, and we will talk about how possibly we can take care of the 5 days. The another thing we need to keep clear is you may have some assumptions beyond what is given in the case study. So you need to talk about those assumptions also, which are not explicitly coming from the situation which has given to you. So before you put anything, you list down the assumption first. So when you are giving a 5 days plan, I would ask, what do you know about the team? Yeah, what you have studied about them in the last 1 week? Yeah, there are some information given in the say case study, but there might be many things which are not given, and you need to put an assumption there. So you start with an assumption and then you take the approach forward. Now again, since it's an interview question, then we may talk about 5 day case study and all, but maybe in the real world it may not be a good example to pause the development and then do all this, because these things are ongoing thing, and there may not be any magical formula to convert the not yet performing team into a performing team in 5 days time. So it depends upon many variables. Who are those individuals? You just got one information. They are of having the experience of 3+ years, but what is their technical skills? Have they worked with each other before? Forming looks like they are newly recruited. Are they part of the same organization for a while, or they have been hired just now? So first suggestion from my side is make a list of an assumption. So what are you assuming? Are you assuming these team members are recently hired in the organization, or you are assuming they have been there for a while and they understand the organization culture and the way of working for a while? That's the thing you need to figure out. You also need to understand that, yes, they are working with the customer. Now, how familiar or how approachable the customer is to these guys. So how frequently they are having customer related requirements and conversations. So that's another assumption we need to make. So about these two assumptions, which assumption you want to make before you answering this question? One is how long they have been working in the organization. Second is how easy to talk and interact with the customer. What are the opportunities they have when they are dealing with the customer? So what are the assumptions we want to add in the case study?
Okay, so if I go about, maybe I'm assuming that that team is recently formed, they are new to the organization and they are new to the project. So it's almost 1 month they have been working in the project before I joined them as Scrum Master.
Okay, so they are just 1 month old and they are still in the forming stage. That's an assumption you are making. So write down that assumption before you present the whole thing, whichever way you present it. But you need to, maybe you verbally tell, then also you tell that things. Now, are these people sitting together or they are working from remote? Like, are they working in the way we are talking, or they are working in the same room? Yeah, that's another assumption you have to put on the paper. And okay, what is the assumption you are making here?
Okay, I'm assuming they are working at the same place.
Okay, that's a because the whole approaches changes when you make these assumptions. Yeah, so that's the second assumption you made. Okay, so make that assumption also clear. What about the interaction and customer orientation? Do they have an understanding of a domain which they are operating in? How easy for them to interact with the end customers? I understand, I saw your case study, it's a little bit technological oriented. So maybe they might be knowing what they are doing already, or what an assumption you make related to the development team interaction. Yeah. So that's the third assumption you have to make. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Because it is, I'm assuming that I have joined them newly, right, 2 or 3 days back. But maybe since they are working for almost a month's time, I'm assuming they have some idea of the like customer requirements, how they need to work, what they need to develop, right? But then it's like maybe I'm assuming they are not frequently interacting with the requirements in their sprint reviews. So that is one of the reasons they are not actually, their development is not customer centric. That's what
Okay,
I'm
so
assuming.
that's a third thing you put in. And what about the role of a product owner? What is the product owner doing?
Okay, so product owner is basically giving the requirements, right? So
No.
he is
In this case, yeah. In this case, yeah.
yeah. So he has once, I'm assuming that because that's not user centric, I'm assuming that the problem here lies is once initially the product owner has taken the requirements, even he is not frequently interacting with the customer, and maybe after once the sprint gets over, the team is continuing with the existing backlog. However, the backlog should be emergent and it should be made visible to the customers frequently. That is not being done.
Perfect. So see, I would say that 50% of your interview might be over when you put the right assumptions in place, or you show the depth of your thinking in those assumptions, because it shows that you need to think about the surrounding environment before you jump to the solving the problem. So that's like I spoke some of the assumptions, but when you make your final pitch or a presentation, or I would say whatever way you want to put this plan in place, you may need to look at the assumption part a little bit more carefully. And whenever you are facing some difficulty, then you may want to make those assumptions again. You may want to modify those assumptions again. Like, for example, we have not yet talked about the team size. You may assume the team size is a Scrum team size. You may assume the product owner is a full-time product owner who is working with them, but he's also a new guy. He's a little bit confused about what is happening. So he's also more or less on the same place. Or he might be a dissatisfied guy and he hardly come and meet you. So meet the team. So we need to find out which one is the case to take the next step. So you make all these set of assumption. Yeah, are we good till here?
Sure, Saket.
Yeah. Now, how do we move forward? So, like again, it's a 5 days, 3 days, 2 days. We need to work on various areas so that team get a good kickstart. Yeah, that's the whole idea here. Yeah. Now, what are the possible areas you think we should work on? Looking at our assumptions and the case study, what should we do? Categorization, where all possibly the improvement is needed. Maybe you share some. I can't hear you. I think there is something wrong.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm saying that we need to improve on their customer-centric development approach. So, right, because as I said, because that's the main problem. So I'm assuming the requirement was taken, the product backlog is not refined properly. The customer is or the product owner is not interacting with the customers to refine the product backlogs for any changes in their requirements, right? So once that has been given, team started working and they are continuing to work.
Perfect.
So that is
So,
one of the area I would like to improve. Yeah.
okay, but
And
perfect. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so how I will be going about it. So there are 3-4 problems, right, in measure, right? They're not
So,
delivering frequently.
yeah,
They're
let's
not
pick up one
customer
by one.
centric.
So we can say one thing is that they are not customer centric. So we can say that one area to work on, how to create more alignment between team and the requirement. How do we make them sense the empathize with the end customer? How do we really make them feel motivated about the work they are doing? How do we make them aligned with the purpose of the initiative? So that's the one direction. And you can say it is a direction which is more about how do we make them product centric, customer centric, and the requirement centric or a delivery centric people when it is empathizing with the end customer. So that's a one area. Yeah. So you can say by default, customer centricity could be a one word. What else?
Okay. So second is they are not delivering frequently. So I'm assuming that there is something either they are not understanding the requirement, or they do not have much clarification on the requirements, what they are going to get, what they are going to develop, even though they might be skilled at the technology. And the second part is because they might be pressurized to put the item from the product backlog to sprint backlog, and then like they are not doing it on their own. So someone is pressurizing them, either the product owner or some other stakeholders. And because of that, because they are not able to commit to the goal, because it's not under their capacity, they are consuming something more than their capacity. That might be the reason.
Okay, so you picked up few elements, and I just want to identify the dimensions first. So one is that you customer centricity you spoke about. The second, you spoke about the lack of proper planning, and because someone is saying do more, they are doing it in a way. You can say lack of self-organizing, but we can say improper planning and scheduling happening somewhere, because there is a so how do we have a better planning and scheduling, or in a way a self-organizing? So let's put a self-organizing as a second category. So it's customer centricity, self-organizing. The third point you brought in, and which kind of thinking, is a collaboration. So they might not be having a collaborative approach between the people who are giving the requirement and people who are executing the requirement. So that's the third dimension I'm picking up from your thought. And the fourth dimension is they might lack some skills. So it's like that's the fourth possibility. Its skill could be technology oriented skill could be understanding the customer requirement thing, or something is lacking. So even if they want to do, they are unable to do it. So that's the fourth thing I'm picking up from here. Yeah. Am I getting
Right.
it right? Yeah. Anything else?
Okay. And what about the average Scrum experience is less? So I have to do something about that as well. So that's what I wanted to know. Shall I go to? Shall I actually start organizing training for them? And if yes, maybe even for the complete team or for the people who are less experienced at the Scrum.
Okay, so another thing you are worried about is they have a lack of understanding of how do we work together, which is more or less assigning, fitting into a planning and self-organizing space, because since they have a lack of understanding of their ways of working, for assumption you are taking Scrum, so they are struggling to figure out what to bring in, what is a product backlog, how to prioritize it. And by teaching Scrum, you will improve their planning and self-organizing.
Right.
Yeah? So you will manage you will balance the capacity and demand. So all those things. So my idea here is based on the assumption. First, we try to make a list of the top critical domains or the areas where you want to focus on. And you can say this is based on my first weeks of understanding. I identified based on these assumptions. So I identified these are the main ticket item. These are the main sections which I believe are the one might be working here. I don't know exactly. And these are the one which might be working here. Now, somebody may ask, how do you know these are the areas which might be working here? What analysis you have done? What assumption you have done? Yeah, so you bring out the product centricity, self-organizing space, technical skills, and collaboration. So, for example, we spoke about these 4 elements. Now, how we know that these are the 4 elements which are, how would you validate that this is your assumption? But before you make a 5 days plan, how do you validate what are the key areas which these people might be suffering from?
Right.
So what would you do? Yeah, probably.
Okay. So I would say like this is my observation.
Okay,
This is
observation
my
of the interaction. That's a one possibility.
yes.
How people
So this is
interact with
my
each other.
observation of the team dynamics, how they
Team
are
dynamics.
interacting.
Okay,
Yeah,
based on
and
team dynamics. Okay, good. Yeah.
and this is my observation of their product backlog,
Product
what they
backlog.
are currently doing, the sprint backlog, right? What are the issues, what are the escalations currently they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So based on that, I will figure out what exactly are the problems, what are the root cause of the problems which are identified in the scenario.
Perfect. So you said that I have an assumption for a presentation, and actually I might do these 4 things to find out what is my next action. But since I am assuming a lot of things, so I assume basis on my interaction understanding, my product backlog understanding, my understanding of the open impediments, my understanding of the previously finished and unfinished sprints, and the escalation. I understood that these are the 4 areas which are worked upon, because you are also making that in a real world. I don't know what is the reality there, because I'm hypothetically working on something. So I made some assumption. Based on that, I did some study, and based on that, I come up with the 4 categories of assuming these 4 categories. Now we need to work on how do we approach these 4 categories. So whatever 4 5, you take your time, make those categories, and then come up with the plan. How do we initiate that? That's the whole thing we need to start with. So let's take few so that we have some common understanding, and then you can build the story further. Assuming collaboration, because the thing which is repeating is the team is in a forming stage. There are new people coming in. They have been told to do something. They can't figure out what to do. So there is a lack of collaboration, lack of understanding of self-organizing. And when they are in a forming stage, that's an anticipated behavior also, that there will be a lack of these things. So what do you do about that? You are in a forming stage. How do you make them comfortable with each other? How do you make them get started? So what kind of activities might be useful there?
Yeah, right. So I thought one of the part how to take it is to start with facilitating the working agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great idea. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. So because I'm even new to the team, even the team is forming, so there is some working agreement. Like everyone will know how we need to communicate with each other, so that like we all are on the same page initially. That's what I thought of. But if I want to put it in my 5-day immersion plan, should I start with this part first, out of the problems which have been
Okay,
mentioned?
perfect. So which part should start first? That's a sequence of things. Now, do we need to do something before working agreement? That's an important question. So what could be the starting thing?
My observation, because
So,
I have spent some 2 or 3 days, and maybe I'm assuming there are 3 days more to complete the sprint. And suppose next Monday I'm going to start my 5-day schedule. So I'm assuming by this weekend I'll be completing my complete observation, and I'll be making a quick list of action items. This is my observation, what needs to be improved, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
know the problem. So what from where I should start, and what should my plan be?
Yeah. So my basic understanding is that we are not very sure, and that's the assumption that people know each other well. That's the basic fundamental issue, which might not be very clear because you made an assumption people might be coming from a different area. You also made an assumption team is in a forming stage. So they may not have a fair understanding of each other. So maybe it's good idea to start with some team building activity where they can have a good introduction to each other. That's the first thing we do. So we want to make sure that people start knowing each other, understanding each other, and they talk about themselves, they talk about how the last 1 month has been and what they are looking from this particular thing. So we give them an opportunity to understand each other's perspective. That's something which might be needed as the beginning thing. Yeah. And that might lead to forming of some amount of a working agreement. Now there is a possibility before working agreement, you might want to give them a brief understanding of how we are going to work for upcoming few sprints. And later on, we will modify the way we operate, because initially you are driving the Scrum way of working. So you need to give somewhere the education piece part of it. So my way of looking at thing, again, it's a very subjective thing to talk about. I may start with a team building activity where we have a good, so the objective of a team building activity is they start knowing each other, so they feel comfortable for rest of the 5 days. If I don't do that in the first stage, even if I am teaching them, they may not ask question. They may be worried about what the other guy will think about their question. So I need to make them little comfortable. That's the first thing I do. And once I make them comfortable, I need to also make them clear that at least for few weeks, how we work together, what is a way of working. Later on, with the help of retrospective, we will improve. But I understand they have not yet started working properly. So I may give a little brief and a session on Scrum, which might be an interactive session where we also explore that how some of the problems which we have faced before might be resolved by this way of working. So I can say that first I have a team building activity. Second, I may do a little bit retrospective plus Scrum training kind of thing. So retrospective of previous ways of working, what was confusing, what are the challenges, and then see how possibly I might drive it, because it's the initial stage project, initial stage of the development team. I talk about how possibly the team might work together. So I introduce Scrum there. What do you think about this idea? Or if you have some other suggestion here?
Yes, that's right. Even I feel that should be the first part because teams should be comfortable with each other, right? They should be knowing the advantages of Scrum. And once I train them, so they will be knowing what they have been doing wrong so far and they need to correct.
Perfect. And then we can get into the working agreement. So it's like this, that we had a fair understanding of each other. Then we had a fair understanding of how Scrum should work. We had a fair understanding of what kind of mistakes we were making. And we have some amount of understanding of how we should be working together going forward. Let's have a first level of working agreement so that we know how do we operate for say next 4 days as well as for upcoming sprints. So we may maybe you can say it's a 1 day event which finishes which finishes with good collaborative team. Not a, like, 1 day you can't make a whole thing collaborative, but at least some amount of understanding. People know each other's name well, people know each other's background well, they understand what kind of an experience one has, what are the preferences they have. So you have a clear tangible things for a presentation and an interview pitch, that at the end of the day, I want to achieve that everybody knows these many things about the other people, so they have some familiarity with each other. And at the end of the day, I want to ensure that they understand how Scrum operates. So that's a second thing I want to operate. And the third thing I want to achieve at the end of the day is they understand how they are going to operate for upcoming few weeks, and they have an agreement on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is something you kind of address the collaboration and self-organizing area. So you took a first step. Again, collaboration and self-organizing is a long journey, but you took a first step towards it. Yeah. Now we need to look at other areas. So assuming the customer centricity. Yeah. Again, it's a half day, 1 day plan. You can figure out it finally. What do you do in order to improve customer centricity? That's the second question now.
Okay. So in order to make sure that it's there, right? The customer centricity is there. I first thing I'll do is I'll make sure what is the problem. Is that something the requirements which the customer is giving are and which are there in the product backlog are not being frequently revised? Do we have proper and frequent communications with the customer, the product owner, and the development team? Or if that is so, where we are lacking, is that something in the sprint review we are actually not doing it properly, right? Are we not making the product backlog visible with the customer that okay, this is what we have developed and this is what we are going to plan for the next sprint, so that they can give their feedback on, and even both the parties are aligned, the development team and the customer. So that can be one of the reasons. That's where I can improve. Okay. And yeah, and I think that would be the most critical part of it, right?
Perfect. So see, the whole idea here is we need to have understanding the assumption which you made first time, and then you made a list of your observation. They will play the critical role here. So we can't make any solution till the time we refer back there. So your assumption should be covering the solution you are giving. That the assumptions and observations which you made. That's a first correlation you need to make. That's the one thing. Now you need to improve customer centricity. So there is a one thing which I'm picking up from your explanation is you improve customer centricity by creating better working agreement between a team and product owner, between the team and stakeholders. So that much I can pick up. Yeah. So that's one thing we can do. What else? Yeah.
Okay. So also it might be possible that during the sprint planning meeting, or the product backlog refinement is not being done properly. I'm assuming this might be possible, right? Because
yeah.
That's
so what do
they
we
are
do?
not aware of.
What do we do if the product backlog refinement is not done properly? You are in a second day of your training plan or whatever you call it. What we should do in order to improve that? Probably.
Yeah, so I'll make sure that I'll go, as I have already gone through the product backlog, right? And I'm going to use it make sure that I will understand from the team if they're aware of the requirements, right? So it's not something in the one day I'll be doing, but this is something I'll be seeing as part of even the working agreement. Like we have to do it. Maybe even I will ask that team if we are doing the product backlog refinement in every sprint. If not, so we'll ask them that we have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So
So
that we all are aware.
the idea here is, and why I am asking you, because it all depends upon the conviction with which you are going to present. Yeah. There is no right and wrong answer. So you need to be very convinced about your presentation. That's the important thing. Now, whatever you are saying, I will observe and tell. That's the observation part. But what they are asking, in my understanding, is what is your 5 days plan? So what are you going to do that day? That particular day, say assuming the day 2 is dedicated to customer centricity, assuming. So what do we do in that day? How the morning till evening, we set some activities which leads to a better understanding of customer, better understanding of a requirement, and may create a collaboration between product management team or a product ownership team and the development team. So one of the things which I got clearly is that at somewhere in the day, we need to form a working agreement, and you can call them external working agreement, where we have a clarity how frequently the product owner or the stakeholder are going to meet the development team, what they can expect, and some kind of a working agreement you may want to form. So that's a good idea. What else as an artifact? I have few things, but yeah, let me see something and then I will share my ideas as well. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make sure, even if the product owner, it may be possible, even if the product owner is aware of the requirements, or even if he's taking them frequently from the customers, but the development team is not clear about the requirements.
Okay.
So maybe the sprint planning and the product backlog refinement meetings are not done properly. The team is not clear of the requirements.
So that is something you observed. Yeah, that is something you observed before you started the 5 day. Now, by that observation, what is you expected to do here is you may have a requirement presentation from a product owner to a development team. For example, you may say that I want a vision presentation and understanding. So we maybe a high level understanding of overall requirement, where the people, the product owner, and maybe a selected stakeholder participate, they interact, and they tell the background story of that particular initiative, so that they get a big picture. So I facilitate an interaction where product vision get understood by the development team, and they may have some queries around it. Those queries get resolved, and I involve the product owner and stakeholder so that we have a better understanding of it. Something like that.
Okay, Saket, so you are saying that there should be a collaborative meeting between the product owner, the stakeholders, and the development teams combined. It should be.
Yeah, and in that meeting, the product owner and stakeholder are presenting the product vision. Yeah, so they tell about what is this whole product is all about, and the development teams are expected to ask questions about that, and they may also see how something work which they have done in last 1 month might relate to that vision realization. What kind of a benefit this product or initiative is going to do to the end user. So that clarification and understanding has to be there. So at the end of this visioning activity, you expect that each development team member knows the reason behind this initiative, and they can clearly articulate the benefit this product is going to give to the end customer.
Right, correct.
Yeah. So now what is the advantage? Now, why are you doing it? Because I am creating the understanding beyond product backlog or a sprint backlog. I am first creating the understanding related to the vision level, why we are doing. Now, you may want to take it little bit more, and you may want to have an understanding even at a level of customer personas. So you may say that I will facilitate a discussion between a development team and product owner, where they will create some of the end user personas or expected users personas, so that we can understand who are the people are in action. Why are we making this particular product? So I may do extension of a visioning activity where we do a user persona activity, and we understand, okay, these are the type of personalities, or an empathy mapping type of an activity. So we understand that these are the type of people we are expected to serve. So say, yeah, so who are your critical customer? What is their basic needs? How your system is going to serve that need? What are their key consideration? What are their pain areas? So you go with a vision, and then you also go at a individual character or actor level, which are the critical actors in your usage space, and you try to understand together along with the development team, product owner, and the stakeholder that, guys, these are the people we should be focusing on. And while doing it, you ensure there is a more and more collaborative things rather than the lectures, so that these understanding also results into better team building between the product owner, stakeholder, and development team. So you are achieving two objectives by this set of activities. One, you are creating more alignment with the requirement. Another, you are creating better communication between these people.
Okay. So if I talk about my second day goes in one of the collaborative meetings with the product owner, the development team, and the customers, right?
Yeah.
And the second one is I will schedule one more meeting, you can say, with the development team and the product owner to create the user personas. So basically creating mapping the requirements from user perspective.
Yeah,
so this
so
is
that
how my
helps
second
us.
day.
Yeah, that helps in mapping the requirement later on from the user perspective. The whole idea here is the second day is centered around developing customer centricity. So how do we develop a customer centricity? By making the sense and importance and understanding of a customer. So how do you do that? First, you talk about your product vision. You have a workshop around that product vision where the people give suggestions, people ask queries, the stakeholder and product owner clarifies it. And it's a 2-3 hours workshop where you really talk about it and understand why we are not doing it. You may talk about what are the competitor products, what are the other solutions which are solving that particular thing. So once that is over, then you get little deeper. Maybe stakeholder may not be available after that, but it created some sense and an understanding and a relationship between the stakeholder, product owner, and the development team. Then you come to a product owner specific space where you talk about why don't we have some user persona, empathy mapping, or some similar tools activity so that we understand before the user story requirement. User story comes very late. The feature is something when you already started thinking of taking care of the requirement. Right now, we are trying to understand who is the guy who has a requirement, who is the user. Why should we care about this user? Why don't we just ignore this user and find some other user? So we need to understand which particular customer segment we are targeting in, which are the user roles we care for, and why do we care for? So we create that empathy so that later on, whenever the user appears in my user story on my feature, I understand who is this guy and why we care for it. And you do it by the help of a customer personas, kind of a requirement elicitation workshop. There could be a lot of questions, there could be a lot of thing. And at the end of it, you have few personas listed and you have a documentation and artifact of user personas, which are jointly created with the help of a product owner and the development team. And later on, you can also validate with the stakeholders, but this whole activity helps us in bringing more centricity towards customer requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And probably you can do a working agreement also here, if that is the area of a problem you see, because and especially when you are coming from a business analysis requirement, I think you may be able to pitch this thing in a little bit better way as well, because you may say, the requirement is not cannot be understood if you keep reading the requirement. One has to understand who is giving the requirement before you understand the requirement which he is giving. So we need to understand the people behind the requirement before we understand the requirement. And that is the reason I am bringing this particular activity to this particular day, because be ready for challenges. That why do you want to do this? What benefit you get? Why do you want to waste a whole day talking about this stuff if it doesn't produce a desired value? Yeah.
Right. So I'm assuming I have spent my 2 days, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, okay. And how should I spend my next 3 days?
I don't know. We need to figure out the categories. So what we have explored till now is we explored the collaboration part, we explored the self-organizing part, and we have explored the customer centricity part. Yeah, that's the third thing. Now, which all areas you want to explore more? Yeah. Now, you also had an issue related to technical piece. Yeah. Now, if you see that is the issue, then you might want to address the technical piece on the day 3. Yeah. So what could be the technical piece issue? Could be analysis of the technical mistakes people have done, some amount of, maybe you invite some expert who can give a little bit background of the technology behind it, or you can have some knowledge sharing sessions which can ensure that we have a better understanding of the technology in place. Yeah. So some expert training on technology, some different team representative may come and present something on technology, or your team might do a brainstorming and analysis of their past mistakes and technology and kind of a mob programming, and they come up with an agreement on some of the guidelines, some of the approaches which they want to follow going forward in order to do their technical work, which may result into refining, defining definition of done. So that could be the ultimate goal of the day 3, where you may say, okay, let's understand how are we going to operate technology wise, and let's come up with a definition of done at the end of it.
Okay. So there is also one problem, like the team is more focused on gathering the requirements and they are delivering infrequently, right? So I'm assuming sometimes they are still into the waterfall mode only. So they are like, maybe for the like they want to list down the complete requirements first, and then they want to go deliver, right? That might be the reason. So how I'm going to plan about it, and how I'm going to, shall I devote a day for it? How I'm going to resolve this?
So that's a particular problem solving. Yeah. So that could be a thing. So you may say that we need to identify some of the issues and do a root cause analysis of those issues jointly. Yeah, that's could be. And one of the issue could be that how do we do a delivery frequently? What I sense here is when you approach a technical problem, when you understand the technology behind it, when you have a clear understanding of a definition of done, and that is taking care of like you on the day 1, you already explained what is Scrum. So they might not be aware of it earlier, that, okay, how do we plan? How do we pick up the work? So you make them aware. And then on the day 3, you are talking about how technically we can do this. Yeah. How can we divide the big requirement into small requirement, what kind of an approaches we should follow, what kind of a technological guidelines we should follow, what should be our definition of done. So the end of the sprint, there is something which can be a kind of meeting your definition of done. I'm not using any other word, but yeah, that's a kind of an understanding we want to develop at the end. Yeah, so that's something depend upon the type of work you have, but you may dedicate towards technological space. Yeah.
Mhm. But as a Scrum Master, maybe I might not be knowing about much
Yeah,
about technology. Right?
perfect.
I
Yeah.
might I might have the overview, right? I will be having overview of the requirements, but then technologically how to achieve it, even I might not be expert in that.
Even
So how
second
I'm
place
going to
also,
make
even
sure?
the second place also. So when you were doing a user specific thing, you were not expert. You invited people. You invited product owner, you invited stakeholder, you facilitate the conversation so that they understand the vision, they understand the user personas. Yeah, and they have some more empathy with those user personas. On a similar way, on a day 3, you will invite the respective people who can help us in understanding the technological landscape of our development, and so that we can speed up the work and ultimately we can reach to a definition of done. Now, it can be done by way of inside the team only people presenting based on the problem they have faced in the last 1 month. Maybe you have a prioritization or an analysis of defects which you had, your analysis of a code reviews defects you had, and then maybe as a team, we agree to how are we going to work together in a coding space. How do we code well? How do we reflect on things our well? And then how are we going to write our definition of done? What is our definition of done? So who tells the definition of done? Someone has to agree to a definition of done before doing a sprint planning. And I'm assuming if there is this much chaos, the definition of done is not there. So how do you approach without having definition of done if you are in this space? The third day, that might be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe
Yeah.
after having the collaboration taken care, big picture taken care, technological understanding taken care, then you relook on the product backlog. Then we may have an understanding and time spending, understanding, creating what is the definition of small story, what is a kind of a definition of ready. So we need to have an understanding. Now team has understood the big picture, they did some homework, they know how to work with each other, they themselves has created some definition of done. Now it's time to look at the product backlog and see how what type of items are there. Do we have a big item? Do we have a small items? And what kind of a alignment and management of the product backlog is needed in order to get started with the upcoming sprint? Do we have well refined user stories? Yeah. And if not, how do we create them? So I believe that some amount of backlog refinement work will come because from the case study, it is clear that they don't have anything. That's the thing we can put up. But backlog refinement before creating a definition of done may also be a little bit weird. So we understand what is the done definition, and then we come up with the backlog refinement, and we spend some time doing some amount of estimation. And you might give a training about that before you do the real backlog refinement. So you give an introduction of Scrum, you started with a big picture, you started with the technological understanding and reach to a definition of done. And then you may talk about how to talk about backlog refinement, how to write a user story. So you give a basic background information about it, and then let the people make those user stories and backlog refinement and see how the backlog emerges at the end of the day.
Okay. So I'm assuming after understanding technology and having the definition of done plan, so my fourth day goes spans in the product backlog refinement activity. So where I'm teaching the team how product backlog is refined, right? And then they are working on it for the complete day.
Yeah. So they are working together. They are working with the product owner and trying to fix the current product backlog and having some amount of user stories refined well so that they can get started in the upcoming sprint whenever the sprint starts. Yeah. So at least we have some ready stories because that will take some time because you have been, that's again the part of your assumption because you have been hearing their requirements are big, they are doing infrequent delivery. So it means the requirements are big. So that might be there could be the reason they don't know how to split the requirement. So before you directly attack the requirement, they need to understand what is agile, what is big picture, what is definition of done. And now let's find out, we have a messy product backlog. Let's clean it up and make it ready for our work. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So once my fourth day goes in, and how am I going to plan for the fifth day? Because I'm
So
assuming I have done the good. Yeah.
yeah. So now again, we need to relook at our existing problem space. So we were talking about collaboration, we were talking about self-organizing, we were talking about customer centricity, and we were talking about technological space. So in a way, we have taken care of all these four areas. Now the fifth day, if you have something which you want to add as a category, then you may add that day, or you may talk about that some more kind of a retrospective day based on what they have done before and what they have learned in the last 4 days. We do a joint retrospective and try to find out what are the key problems, key impediment, which might be blocking their move path forward. And then we do a list of those impediment, and then we do a problem solving workshops around those impediments. So in the initial 4 days, it was more like predefine learning and teaching and creating the background. The day 5 could be the analyzing the environment, analyzing from their perspective, what is blocking them, making a list of those things, prioritizing those impediments, and having our impediment backlog, which you will own as a Scrum Master, and you will try to resolve them so that they start working well. So ultimately, once we have basic things taken care, people have a good understanding of each other and technology, then we say, okay, if these are the 5 things can get resolved, and we do a joint exercise to find out how to resolve it, and we may have those items added in the product backlog as a resolution. You may spend time into identifying and resolving impediments.
Okay. So I would say my fifth day will be more of kind of retrospective, right? So my retrospective meeting could include something like what they have been doing previously. Now they have the understanding. So what they understood was wrong in those previous sprints, which should not be continued further, and what is new we are going to take up in the next sprints in order to improve them. So there can be one retrospective meeting once I have like they have been given the complete understanding of the Agile, the Scrum, right,
Perfect. Perfect.
and
And
the
the another
collaboration.
thing, yeah, another thing you are adding in this is identifying the impediments. Because see, you made all these things based on your observations. They might have a different observations. And initially they are in a forming stage. If you ask them on the day 1 about their observation, they may not share those observations. They may not be comfortable sharing those observations. So you gave them the education, and now you are asking, okay, if we fix all these things, what else we need to do about it? Somebody may come forward and say, I need a training on this particular space. Somebody may come forward and say, we need a license of this particular thing. Somebody may come up and say, we don't need a daily Scrum on this particular frequency. We need it differently. So we do identify what are the problems or impediments you guys might be facing based on your last 1 month of experience. And some of the things may get resolved because we have fixed some of the process related stuff, and then we have an agreement on how do we move forward. But yeah, is there any impediments there? So we may spend the day 5 on impediment related stuff. We may also spend day 5 on having an agreement on our tools and processes of working. So we had a working agreement at first level, but now how our Jira board will look like, how we are going to assign work to each other, what should we do. So some amount of a training on those tools, or whatever way of working, maybe a physical board, if the physical board is the case, that may also come on the day 5. So day 5 is more about, we have a fundamental understanding, and now we are talking about, okay, these are the 3 problems I'm still thinking about. I don't see any solution of it. So that the developer may say that, then let's talk about problem solving, and some of the impediment may get logged. You need to resolve those impediments some point in time. And then we also talk about, okay, now let's finalize how do we work together in the upcoming sprints, and some tools, and the way we say transparently share information with each other, the way we do daily Scrum, and all those things may also get communicated and agreed on the day 5. Yeah. And then we continue, inspect, and adapt around it. Yeah. So again, this is all tentative. So you probably need to think and see the assumption and the approaches, and the conviction for those approaches will be the key area. And how do you handle questions when people ask, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that? That is, whenever there is a thing which you have missed telling, and they say you should be doing that, then you go back and say, this was the assumption I made, and because of this assumption I felt this is not needed. Yeah. So You never say it is not the right thing to do, but you can say, okay, since I made this assumption, I kind of deprioritize this particular activity here, or something like that.
That's right. That's right. Also, one thing is because they are not, one of the part was they are not customer centric. So, is that the reason that there can be something like there are not proper releases planned and not proper basis that not like maybe the product vision is not clear, the releases are not planned properly, and basis those the sprint work is not planned correctly. So, can they do something about that as well?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? That's a part of things. So the whole idea of a customer centricity is I don't worry about customer. I just tell me what I have to do and I do it. So I'm more worried about what I'm doing. I'm not worried about what customer really needs. That's how I understand customer centricity. So when I'm customer centric, I always think like a customer. I understand what my customer really need, what are his pain points, and what are the things which will help him or her. And when I have that empathy with my customer, I can feel what my customer is feeling. I'm a customer centric.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay.
So,
I think that answers my question.
good. So let's see and prepare the thing. And I do believe there is no right and wrong here. You just need to go with your best approach, and you take it as it comes in your way. Yeah.
Thank you, Sakit. Thank you so much.
Good. Nice talking to you. Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.